Our friend Wajiru Ikonyo from the Institute for Social Accountability and others went to court after the new government came in office in 2013. New administration under a new Katiba. It was the first time that we were actually now fully actualizing the Constitution of Kenya 2010 after going into an election and electing people into the national government, electing people into the county governments, experiencing for the first time devolution in the country in the way that we had set in the Katiba. Before 2010, there had been some brilliant ideas by people like Engineer Muriuki Karue, who had thought of how can we ensure that there is trickle down of money to the local level that enhances development. It was trying to mirror the district focus for rural development that had been there in the Moi era, which district development committee is chaired by the local DCs and then bring in other people, and the DC would sit there and say, tutajenga shule, tutajenga soko, tutafanya this and the other, and then money would come and money would be spent that way. Now, the Constituency Development Fund, as it was envisioned then, was a way of bringing money to a constituency at that level and having the local representative being in charge of that development. Of course, the whole idea initially was, we'd have committee, representative committee from the constituency. It's just that the head of this is the member of parliament. Come in the constitution, come in devolution, all those things. Now we have to say, okay, so if devolution has devolved things and there's devolution of devolved, it means the member of the National Assembly is now no longer an agent of development. It's the executive that is an agent of development, and the executive is national executive and county executive. So Wajiru and the others went to court and they said, now these people have a CDF thing, and the MP is still controlling money and controlling development and getting a budgetary allocation through Parliament, which is not an executive. The case went all the way to the Supreme Court. We heard what the Supreme Court said the other day. Now the debate has been, so is CDF constitutional or not? The lawyer who took up that case all the way to the Supreme Court and is back to the High Court with a different case is here with us in the studio. Wakili Dudley OCHIEL, good morning.
Morning, Eric.
Good to have you on the show again.
Thank you.
So, have I given a good background?
Yeah,
apart from one or two areas?
I think you've given a good background to the case and the idea behind CDF, which was to reduce the national government's control over financial resources back in the day. Other ideas like LATIF, close to your name, local area transfer fund.
Yeah, local authority transfer fund.
Local authority transfer fund, yes. That tried to decentralize resources. And this decentralization idea goes back to independence. When we formed as a nation, we have regions. But then Kenyatta One kills it by starving the regions of funding. We had Majimbo, exactly what we now call devolution, but it was then called Majimbo. And I don't know why this Majimbo federalism has such a bad name. It evokes some kind of fear.
And
or
Kenyatta
emotion.
One, they did a very good job.
Yeah.
It was given a bad name.
Yeah.
It was proclaimed that it would divide the country. And it was argued then that if you had the singularity of a party, you would then unite the country as opposed to having these regional divisions. Now, unfortunately, that argument, if you look at it, that's one side of the argument. The other side was, this was somebody who was, what we call a confirmation bias. Meaning you want to do something, then you look for reasons to justify. But the understanding is you want control. But so now you find reasons to justify your control.
Yeah. So this federalism in the constitutional world, it's called the F word. It's so feared. The Supreme Court says that Kenya is not federal, though we know that a state that is federal is simply one that has two or more levels of government. Ethiopia, Nigeria, United States. But then the Supreme Court says that, no, we are unitary. I mean, maybe speaking to national unity. But the United States has the word united in its name, but is the most federated country in the world. Anyway, so this idea of decentralizing resources is what led Engineer Karu, as you've said, to the idea of CDF, Constituency Development Fund, so that the national government does not have monopoly on the allocation of financial resources. But that was before the Constitution of Kenya 2010, which has now perfected that idea of fiscal decentralization, so that there's a set percentage of funds and more that goes to the counties. And so the question becomes, how relevant is CDF if the goal it had tried to achieve has now been perfected elsewhere? And if now CDF interferes, in fact, with that scheme? Remember, the law is formulated in a way that the percentage that goes to CDF depends on the national government shares. And that's the first issue now, because it gives a corrupt motive to members of parliament. And we've had issues of allocation to counties. It gives them a corrupt motive to ensure that the national government gets as much as it can. Why? Because CDF depends on how much the national government gets. That's why we have all the standoffs between Senate and National Assembly on how much money should go to counties. That's the first issue we have with CDF. And sorry.
No, go ahead.
Okay. The other thing is you have constituencies as an election unit. Election for president is conducted at the constituency level countrywide. The constituencies also give us the 290 MPs, but then they sit within counties. Yet, the CDF creates constituencies as a center for development and execution of functions rather than as a representative unit. So the CDF is focused at the constituency. These constituencies, within the county, they are called the sub-county. But CDF flows along the constituencies line as opposed to the sub-counties. And there's then a conflict between the county functions at the sub-county and then this idea of the CDF, the constituency running the CDF projects. There's also another issue with it. Then there's also the idea of conflict of interest. MPs allocate the appropriate funds to national government entities, including the CDF board. Then, having appropriated, they go down to the constituencies to spend the money. Then they come back to oversight because they look at all audited reports. So they run back, play the game, then come back and referee it. That's also another issue. Yeah, the issues are so many.
There are many.
Yeah, maybe I could pause.
But this was now the case that you took to court in 2013, 2014, challenging the CDF as it was then. As soon as the High Court pronounced itself on that, of course, the clever members of the National Assembly and those that sit in the executive were like, okay, so the issue, what is the issue? Issue is that we are giving money to Parliament and then Parliament is going to run. Okay, how about we as a national government with our executive role and function take money to the constituency and then we just say the member of Parliament will play the representation role by being a patron of this, making sure that, when a CDF committee is sitting and determining where projects shall go, they are doing the oversight to represent everybody as a voice, to say the 17 projects have gone to this side of the constituency. Also the other side are members of the same constituency. So that was a clever one. And that's how we came up with the National Government Constituency Development Fund, which is now not going through Parliament, the legislature, is coming straight from the executive. So that is, as far as we stand today, that is legal, is it not?
Well, this is what happened. After the High Court found the CDF Act 2013 unconstitutional, it gave Parliament 1 year to amend the law. It suspended that invalidity. It's called suspension of invalidity. It's useful because sometimes when you create an instant gap in the law, then you lead to chaos. People had been employed as CDF managers and whatever. Projects were running, pending bills, and there was money in the account. So if you just close it once and say, no, this is the end of this story today, then you create chaos. So the law allows courts to give reliefs called suspension of invalidity. The court suspended the invalidity for 1 year to allow the winding up, to allow the law to be changed to match the Constitution and to correct the violations that the court had found. So on the last day of that suspension, Parliament brought into force a law, the National Government Constituency Development Fund. But Parliament had also appealed. So when we went to the Court of Appeal, we told the Court of Appeal, look here, this dispute is over. The law that we had challenged has now been repealed by the enactment of another law.
Yeah.
It's called implied repeal. When you create two laws, that one is inconsistent with the other, then the later law is now what you use. You don't have to expressly say we are repealing this
repealed
one.
the other one.
Yeah. So we told the Court of Appeal that because of that implied repeal, the case is now dead. Let us go back and argue the constitutionality of the National Government Constituency Development Fund 2015. The Court of Appeal said, no. There's no repeal here. The new act does not contain the word repeal. The controversy is still continuing. The dispute is live. And in any case, National Assembly told the Court of Appeal that it would harmonize the two laws.
Right.
Yeah, that has never happened to this day and will never happen.
Why?
Because one has been declared unlawful by the Supreme Court, the CDF Act. So you can't harmonize
An
them.
illegality
Yeah.
with something else.
Yeah, and it was just an excuse anyway.
Let
And
me
so,
ask-
yeah.
Let me ask you this question. In considering all the vagaries of the law in this particular matter, what role did the functionality and the benefit of this fund play in determining all these things?
A major role. The Court of Appeal says that, looks at the nobility. It says that it's noble to have the CDF. I think they're influenced by that. And sometimes when you've had something for so long, it looks normal. Courts wonder, why do you want us to disrupt this? What will happen to the people employed in it, the projects it's been doing? It's been there for so long. I think it was courageous of the Supreme Court to say that
Come out and say no.
it doesn't matter how long we've had it. It says that expressly. It doesn't matter how long we've had it. If it's against the Constitution, it should not be there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wendo.
All right. So is it then prescriptive in judgment? Because the question that would then arise thereafter is, so at the conceptualization of this fund, many would argue that then there were many things that were done as a result of it for development at the constituency level, isn't it?
Yeah.
So, and just to be clear, are we saying that the operation of the CDF by members of parliament is what was deemed illegal, or the entire fund is what is unconstitutional, that fund should not be there for counties to dispense?
It can be there for counties to dispense. The Constitution allows Parliament to allocate what we call conditional grants. It's a grant made with conditions that you're only going to spend these on these items. And they could also go further and say you're only going to spend it within the sub-county. But the idea that MPs who should legislate, represent, and oversight can manage and run projects and execute those functions, I think the Supreme Court says that that's unlawful. And it extends the idea to any legislator, because the CDF has its foster children, the World Development Fund. Senators tried to come up with the county development boards, where that would approve projects and that had a budget allocated to it. We know that the women rep also have their National Government Affirmative Action Fund, created through regulations, that also gives them some fund. We're coming after all those funds.
Okay, so then is it prescriptive in nature then what should happen? Because I don't think we can run away from the fact that then there were beneficiaries of the fund. And I'm not talking about those who may have dipped their hands in the cookie jar. I'm talking about people at the county level who, whether it was via education, whether it was via grants, whether it was via seeing that a school dining hall or whatever was built or a bus bought, etc., is it prescriptive then in nature as to then who would govern the fund to allow development at whatever level continue?
I see your question. I think if we go back to my original statement about the intention of the CDF, it was to decentralize financing so that people at the local level can make decisions on matters affecting them.
Yes.
That's now the object of devolution. If you look at Article 174, to enable decision making over local issues.
Yeah.
So there's that conflict between the CDF as it was envisaged and the current devolution. There's that clash. CDF says that it's targeted at community projects. Counties work on community projects. That's why they exist. So there's that clash of issues. So if National Assembly feels that there are areas that need funding, specific items, maybe something like drought management at the local level or whatever, or schools, nothing stops them from making conditional allocations, conditional grants, telling counties that you can budget whichever way you want with the rest of the money we give you, but we're giving you $1 billion or 100 million or whatever for each county, and this money must go to this specific item.
So essentially what you're saying is that the initial concept of CDF was to bring about development at the county level, which is what devolution was supposed to do anyway, so there should be no need for this additional fund. Is that what we're saying?
Yeah.
Okay.
But did the CDF not come before devolution?
It did.
Yeah.
And that's why we are saying,
After devolution, then CDF should have
Should not
ended.
exist.
yeah, in the Bible, there's the idea of the one prophet coming before the other. A prophet speaking of someone who then comes. So if you have the perfect form of fiscal decentralization, which is in devolution, you have this amount of money that goes to the counties every year. And there's a ability to give more, in fact, conditional and unconditional to the counties. Then it's spent there and it's oversighted. Then why do you still need devolution?
Dudley,
Sorry, CDF.
that chap in River Jordan did not stop preaching and baptizing people.
No.
After he baptized Jesus.
Yes.
He continued to do that as Jesus went ahead now to start
In fact,
preaching.
he stopped baptizing when his head was chopped off.
Yes.
Yes.
Literally.
Look, I don't really understand this argument. Let me say, what I don't understand about this argument is this. The entire issue around devolution has to do with ensuring that the smallest unit of government is able to make certain decisions about their welfare because money is given to them. So my question is, where do you stop devolution? If there's a county, we've devolved it. Why not devolve it to a constituency? Why not devolve it to a ward? Now that, in my opinion, will be precisely what you've been referring to. We'll have now the perfect situation where we've devolved properly. And then begs the question, how do you change the constitution so that it can allow for this?
They can allow for all these
Yes.
things.
Reminds me of something. During the campaign, I think Governor Sakaja now said something about borrows and, you know,
Yes.
and people
Subdividing.
were like, oh, so brilliant. But that thing is in the law already. We have the urban areas and cities
Yes,
Act,
we do.
which speaks about the counties devolving further. We already have villages, we have wards, we have village administrators.
We do.
Yeah. So
But
it's-
they are not funded directly.
Okay, I get what you're saying.
Yes.
Well, I don't know what can be done about that. Maybe the law can be tweaked to fund, but I believe that when the counties are budgeting, they budget for their units, the units within them.
Yes. In this country, they budget. How many counties have issues with the Auditor General, EACE, because of this same thing? They budget for one thing, and what they do is only God who knows. Okay?
Yeah.
Accountability, if it's left at the county level, it's just made as what used to be at the national level. When you bring it to the smaller units, the accountability factor is greater because these are people you can easily reach. County governor is far away. They might as well be in Nairobi.
I think that's an entirely different discussion. The issue of accountability in how we use our funds and why we need to be careful on how we elect our governors. Because these people are meant to touch some of the most vulnerable populations within our countries. In the issue of the equalization fund that's meant to bring the areas that were left behind to par with the others.
Council,
Yeah.
we are a country that have not even operationalized the equalization fund.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yes.
We, okay?
Yeah.
The
Because
reason
you're arguing about who
who
deserves
did what and who should
Yeah.
get 1 shilling and who should get
How
a
do
shilling
we
and a
define
half. Exactly.
marginalized?
And it's nearing its end, by the way, because it was a 20-year
Yes.
fund.
Now, we are the same
We have
country
8 years to go.
that understood that so long as it was the national government controlling everything, we had a problem. When you mirror the national government at the county level, you haven't really changed anything. As we like saying in Kenya, you've just devolved corruption. So, and the reason is because you cannot, as a citizen of a county, hold the governor accountable. How are you going to? An MCA you can. That's somebody you know. That is somebody who is your fellow villager. An MP, again, the same. All I'm saying is, you say it's a different argument. I'm saying it's exactly the same argument. Because for us, accountability, we cannot entrust a position, an electoral position, with the mandate of ensuring that the citizenry actually get what is their due. We cannot. Accountability has to be enshrined in the law to the point where funds are allocated directly. Now, then accountability becomes, in my opinion, a viable discussion.
So what's your argument with reference to CDF?
CDF should stay. Find a way. If you want to change the constitution, let CDF stay, and then create also the same
A ward
CDF.
development fund.
Precisely. That really is my argument.
Why not have ward development fund alone without CDF? Like you said, it's easier for you to hold your MCA accountable because it's your village mate,
Okay.
and more difficult as you go up. So it'll be more difficult for MP. It'll be more difficult for governor. as
Then
you said.
why then don't we have a situation where the national government simply makes policy and then takes all the money it makes and gives it to the counties to run? Why? Because everything is done in the counties. Every
Right.
function of government is made in the counties.
In concurrent areas of concurrent functions, the national government makes policies and standards, and the counties implement.
implementation?
Anyway, the issue with saying that the ward development fund would be okay to have is the same. There's still the idea of separation of powers. The MCA's budget for the counties, then they would now be executing the functions and then running back to oversight.
Necessarily, you can look at it from the executive side. The ward administrator is the one who's in charge of that fund.
Well-
And then the MCA plays an oversight role by bringing the members of the ward to
Okay.
play.
That would be okay,
Okay,
then.
okay,
If
let's
it's
take a
the
break.
ward,
Let's take a break. 28 minutes to 10. Constituency Development Fund. The whole idea of having a CDF. There are those that say we have seen the work of CDF. There are those who say, okay, it doesn't matter. The idea is wrong. That's what the Supreme Court judges said. It is unconstitutional. It should not exist because it goes against the whole concept of separation of powers and all.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.
Wakili OCHIEL, he is the lawyer among those who are taking the case against the CDF all the way to the Supreme Court. They won that case. There's another one that is challenging the NG-CDF Act of 2015, which is what is in operation now, and members of parliament are saying, "Munasema nini bwana?" That was 2013. We have a different one. It's a whole different mongrel. Andrew says, CDF money was used by the Dagoretti North MP to construct walls around Muthangari police station and Nairobi Primary School. Apparently, the parent agencies had no funds to do what had not previously been seen as priorities. So here is the thing, Dudley. There is on the ground, and whether people are have felt the impact. Many of the people who will tell you, yes, we have seen a classroom built. We have seen roofing done in a school. We have seen a hospital that did not have this and the other. It was sorted. Others did not have walls. A police station that did not have walls. A primary school that did not have walls. They have gotten sorted. I told you guys about the time in last year when I'd gone to Odaya and I took several photos. The local MP had put all those signboards in everywhere where CDF has been utilized. Petron MP Geshoke. CDF had bought desks and computers and storage lockers for the local court in Odaya. CDF had gone to the police station. They had put doors in toilets. Doors. Okay? Now you may say, doors. Of course. What is a toilet if you don't have a door? So they went and sorted that out. And those were projects that were done using CDF money. The question, though, is police, Ministry of Interior gets its own budget. Courts, judiciary, requests for money, is allocated money, receives money. They had not done those things for their officers. Now, is there a clash there? Or are we saying that the local community looked and so we have a need? We are not going to wait for Nairobi to decide to send money to come and sort out their magistrates. We need a place, a waiting room when people come to court. Dudley.
Well, that reminds me of another challenge with the CDF. Well, let's say you want to contest for Odaya seat, and now you're going against a CDF spending incumbent who spent it over 5 years and splashed his name on the signposts around those projects for the last 5 years. You begin on a skewed level. The incumbent has an unfair advantage over you as a contestant. So it also poisons our electoral system. It's a form of voter inducement in favor of the incumbent members of parliament, and that's why they're fighting to have it. That's why the women rep fought to have the national government affirmative action fund. So they also have a budget to spend where they can,
But Wakili,
yeah.
it could also be because the people want to see what are you doing. Okay, so you are representing us. How are we feeling your impact on the ground? The people are demanding these things. The people want to see. So we have an MP here. What has this MP been doing? The MP has oversight over 100 million shillings every year. Where has that money been going? And it's only a few people who are members of that committee, and those ones are not answerable directly to the people. The MP is. So maybe it's just a way. This having a signboard is advertising. This is part of accountability that City was talking about, because people can see, desks, we can see.
Done.
You know, the ideal situation Wakil is referring to here is what we all would like to see. The discussion even that we're having right now wouldn't arise if some of these things had actually been done. The reason why the discussion of devolution, and the reason why I am forwarding this particular discussion of devolution, is because the trust that was given to the national government to ensure that these functions were not met. The writers of our constitution understood this when they said, this thing isn't working. This experiment isn't working. So let's start a new experiment. And I'm saying, take the concept of devolution to its nth. Devolve to the smallest possible unit. Now, what we're discussing against this is the legal ramifications and the legal permissions and the legal platform from which these can be operationalized. Now, that's where there seems to be a problem. Then sort that out. That's a smaller problem. Make sure that it is legal for us to be able to do these things. Because the unfortunate thing is, if indeed there were adequate schools, if indeed there were desks and waiting rooms in our courts, if indeed there were public toilets that functioned, then I would just say that you don't need a CDF. There are enough schools, and we ensure that there are always schools. So the MP's job is just oversight. But we don't have them.
We don't have them.
And there is no guarantee that the national government will understand the basic needs of that ward and that county. So let the person who is actually elected by those people take care of that interest. This really is my argument. If they're taken care of, then by all means, remove the CDF.
I agree that let's have two levels of government, like the Constitution says.
Okay.
Take the counties down to the lowest feasible unit, because that's the idea of devolution, so that local decisions are made at the local level, by the people it impacts. But this third entity called the CDF interferes with our ability to do that. If things need to be done, let the people who are elected to do them. And that's the national executive at the national level and the county executive at the county level, not MPs. We don't elect them to execute functions. And remember that this CDF has created yet another challenge, and that's the challenge called the MPs' pay. Because through CDF, we've tuned ourselves to know that MPs do things, they attend funerals, they fundraise for us, they justify their pay because of those expectations. Then currently meeting SRC in secret. And I think Katiba has written a letter telling SRC and the speaker to
Stop going for
disclose,
those meetings.
to disclose what they've discussed at those meetings and make it public. That's another challenge that the CDF has led us into.
Wakili,
Yes.
I see what you're saying, and you are an absolutist. I can see you're a purist. Yes, you are. You're
One
looking
of
at
the
the law in its
He looks
purest.
at the letter.
Oh yes, and it is good that you
It must be that. Black and white. This is what it says.
because I would have assumed that what the CDF did, it then removed that burden that the Mheshimiwa has for these things, because the CDF does those things for you. These, what are Harambes for? Schools. CDF does that for you. What are Harambes for? The things that
Health.
the CDF does, you see? And then you throw in the county government, for instance, which is supposed to not just oversee, but who has been given the mandate to manage health at the county level. I actually do not see. We are looking at just pure undiluted greed on the part of our esteemed members of parliament and thinking it has to do with CDF. No. These guys just want to be paid more money. Irrespective, even if you tripled the amount of CDF, they still want to be paid more money.
So, CT, then can we have CDF but minus MP?
Yes.
So that there is money that's going all the way to the local level.
Yes.
Coming from national government,
Yes.
through the county government,
Yes.
to the village.
Yes.
But the people who are in charge of this are the local villagers.
Exactly why I was asking if there's a
No
prescriptive
MP.
judgment.
Yes.
Yeah, if there's a prescriptive judgment, because if the issue here is that the management being done by members of parliament who have other things to do, right, is the issue.
The issue is the involvement
If the
of
issue is the
this
involvement of members of
elected
parliament, elected
representatives.
representatives, remove it from them
Yes.
and give it to someone else. Because I think if there's anything we've established is that the CDF, in terms of development, was aiding development at the county level.
is very useful.
At the constituency level, it is useful.
very
The
useful.
problem is that the people who are handling it, we don't want, right? So is it?
But the people
is
that we connect with, you
prescriptive
see,
judgment
there's
to
also
say,
the other
then
side.
all right, let somebody else handle it.
There's the other side, okay? So if it came like that and we said, at the village level, we shall elect the village committee that is in charge of decision making at village level and allocating these funds, all right? They'll be answerable to that machinery of the national government, the Ngao. So what's that lowest level guy called? Is it the headman? Yeah.
Yeah.
So that headman who reports to blah, 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 goes all the way to chief, goes all the way to assistant county commissioner, to county commissioner, to Kithure Kindiki up there. That person does not feel answerable to the village. That person feels answerable to Kithure Kindiki in Nairobi. But the elected person feels,
And they know.
if I actually do not listen to what these people are saying, they will remove me. This guy is paid a salary anyway, whether tumia pesa ama mjatumia. How do you bridge that? Can you see the dilemma?
I see the dilemma. I think that we have, just back to the idea of two levels of government. We have two with three branches. We elect the judges. How do they feel accountable to the people? I mean, we have the executive also that's still accountable to the people. So the idea of accountability to the people cuts all through. And that's why devolution depends largely on civic education and public participation. So that people there's this idea that the Kenyan citizenry is adult, it can decide for itself. So every government decision must be taken to the people and, they just have a conversation over it to enrich their idea. And that's why some of us get scared, for example, when you hear a new declaration of a government policy like Shamba system, and you wonder when were people asked about this, So it doesn't matter. This idea of accountability works through public participation. And I think that there's no need for us to say that the MPs are the only ones who can be accountable to the people because they're elected. Every government official must be accountable to the people. The Article 10 national values and principles of government that we had. There's this suggestion that, MPs do things for us. And my question would be, how many fundraisers do you think Senator Tom Coons in the US attends? I mean, let these people choose. If they want to execute, let them vie to be governors. Then they can execute functions.
You know,
If they vie to be MPs,
well, Kelly here is a purist. The reason why Coons and his cousins don't need to do Harambes is the simple fact that these things that we raise Harambes for, they have. The district in which you live, there'll be a school. It's not far away from you. You don't have to leave Syokimau to take your child to study in Kijabe.
And the district government is in the business of regulatory rehabilitation.
Yes.
So you don't have to say, "Oh, our wall fell down."
No.
They're working
No.
on it. You don't have to say, "Oh, we need school lunches." It's a government federal program.
It's there.
Whereby kids are fed. There's social protections whereby these things are done. So the system is
Yes.
already prescriptive in nature that these things exist anyway. A senator can come to Nairobi and, benchmark if they like. They don't have those fundamental issues to worry about.
Mheshimiwa mpendwa wakili.
Wakil.
Yes, Mheshimiwa mpendwa wakili. You know, in Tanzania, Mheshimiwa ni the voter.
yeah.
We are in a country where a member of parliament will use CDF money to buy a car for the constituency. When you have an election, they'll brand that car to use as they see fit.
As has been done.
Yes,
To carry constituents. It's a pickup.
to vote for him. I understand where you're coming from.
Yeah.
But I am saying, until you give me a prescription where these ills that necessitate the discussion we're having are done away with, and we can know for sure that just fundamental services will be provided for. These roles that we keep abrogating to our members of parliament will simply not be needed. They'll just represent us. And that will be it. And talking about politicians and the money, politicians are the ones who encourage this giving of money.
Yeah.
Yes. So
Because
them
it
telling us,
benefits them.
yes, yes. So them telling us that they need more money because they give money, they're the ones who encourage it.
No, the problem is that I think it starts with all of us Kenyans. We look at MPs and look at all the... Chris is saying CDF and MPs should not be in the same room, not even in the same building. Those guys have managed to convince people that they are CDF managers, not legislators. And that is absolutely wrong, because CDF is a good idea that is dying because of being tied to the wrong arm of government.
I agree.
It is not just MPs, my friend Chris. When you move that thing,
Give it to whomever
the
else.
CDF committee is actually elected by people, right?
Yes.
The CDF committee is not handpicked by the MP.
In
Okay,
practice,
sour.
in
No,
practice,
no,
it's
no,
handpicked.
No. We are
But
talking
it's
about
elected.
Dudley's letter.
Oh,
In letter, how is a CDF committee constituted?
Well, some are elected, but the PSC still has a role, the Parliamentary Service Commission, in picking the managers. Yeah.
That's the manager. The committee
Well,
elected.
some are
elected. People elect. So there's accountability. We can remove the MP.
Eric,
And
I
say-
think the MP appoints some of the members.
Yes, it does. That's the election we're talking about.
Did you mean selection?
No.
Election.
CDF
The
committees
election.
are supposed to be elected to represent. So what will happen is that the patron, of course, will oversee and make sure that there's representation. There is representing the face of the constituency and all those things. Let's even now say let's rewrite this law and say that CDF committee members shall be elected via universal suffrage at the constituency level. Okay, and let's remove the MP. My friend, do you see how people fight over resident associations?
Yep.
Umekula service charge,
Yes.
small money.
Yes.
We just don't trust one another, my friend. So we can say that we are bringing money to the ward level, to the village level, to the lowest level, and say X amount of money has come. Every year, this village shall receive 50 million shillings for you to use as you determine fit as members of the village. People will be killing each other over that.
Yes. And I think they should. It's a good thing because
They should kill each other.
it is. It's a good. The reason why you find me advocating for this is for this simple reason. The only way you get people to understand accountability is by allowing them to practice it. Let them mess it up, Let them do whatever it is they're going to do with it, but they understand it. Because you need to remove the mindset that people have that of serikali coup. It's now county coup.
Yeah.
And the thing that they believe can be devolved is how corruption can be devolved so that money can get to them, not services. Let them understand that this money that was given to you, it is you who misused it. It is good. That is the learning process. So you are no longer cascading the blame upwards. It is you. It actually stops with you. That really is what I'm actually trying to say. How do you get people to unlearn what we've learned for these 59 years? It is by giving them the responsibility.
Shock therapy.
Yes, let them be responsible and then let them understand the ramifications of this decision making that they've wanted, they now have. It's not complicated. How have we learned to be able to get to the point where we can talk about impeaching a governor? It's because certain powers have been put into practice and you can see how it works. You may think it is lopsided, you can think it's a rough road, but that's the path that we have to follow. Our mindset still is serikali's idea, it is mkubwa's idea, it still is. And so long as it's there, all these games we keep talking about and all these ups and downs we keep referring to will persist. It has to come to an end at some point.
And it will come to an end through proper legislation. The US and other countries work because their legislators make laws on those issues. They don't drop from the sky.
And enforce those laws.
And enforce them. And the other thing is, we're saying that MPs are not involved in these appointments, but the term coincides with something else, which is the term of MPs. The first meeting is convened by the elected member of parliament, the meeting at which these appointments are made. Their hands is in it. They can't withdraw it.
He's a patron. I mean, it has to work with the term of the
See, the
patron.
Bwana Mkubwa syndrome is still there.
Yeah.
Yes. And we also have expectations from the Bwana Mkubwa. Why is it that we find it strange when you hear of a member of parliament or a governor who doesn't dish out money? You find it strange. It should be the norm.
Yeah. We've inculcated that culture.
Yes.
We've made it normal. And that's why there's a lot of difficulty in moving away from it.
I agree.
Yeah.
Because it's normal, it doesn't mean it's right.
True.
So, Wakili, what happens next? So, the Supreme Court said what it said about CDF,
Yeah.
but there's a court that's still...
And other funds.
And
If
other funds.
Parliament were faithful, which it is not, it would be winding up those funds. It would publish a bill to repeal, to revoke the National Government Affirmative Action Fund Regulations 2016. If it doesn't, we'll definitely have to go to court to kill it, to have it wound up. It would wind up the CDF, NGCDF. Treasury would not make additional allocations to it. But if it doesn't, then there's a case that's still in court, comes up on 25th of October to see if the Chief Justice has replaced Justice Mativo, who is now at the Court of Appeal. There was a 3-judge bench. Mativo Justice went to the Court of Appeal, and so only 2 judges are left. So we have a mention for it on 25th of October to see what happens. Now that's the National Government Constituency Development Fund. But if the Supreme Court is meant to pronounce what the law is, and once it does, that is the law, and it applies to every situation. It applies to this NGCDF case. I think it will just be a matter of the High Court applying what the Supreme Court has said. And when the ward development funds are challenged, as they will be, and when the National Government Affirmative Action Fund is challenged, as it will be, I think it will just be for the courts to apply the principles that the Supreme Court has now said. But I think I heard Ukuri attorney saying that they would not disburse the CDF, but he's gone out already now. I don't know
Who
what
is
the new
he?
guy will say.
Disburse
No,
what?
He's still there. Hasn't gone out yet. He's still there.
Disburse what?
He's no longer the CS.
Disburse what?
He's the CS.
Until a
Ukuri
new one,
attorney.
till a new one
CS.
is
He's
Oh,
a
yeah.
CS.
formally
He's a
appointed.
Formally
CS.
appointed.
He's a CS.
Okay, Equity deems done what ought to be done.
Yeah.
I think it's just a matter of time anyway.
Wakili, thank you very much for joining us. And of course, when you go back to court and you get the direction on the particular case that's still pending in the High Court, we hope to hear from you and you tell us what happens next.
Thank
And we'll follow up this conversation as well.